Hey everyone, let me know if you can hear me okay. I see we got all our regulars there. We're going to be starting in about 1.5 minutes. So how are you guys? Just let me know if you can hear me okay. Let me just adjust this mic a little bit. Maybe it's going to help. And good to see you, Stuart, Russ, Tracy, Ray. Lots of regulars here. Awesome. All right, it sounds like Russ can hear me. Can I have a follow-up on today's topic? PSN dimension. Oh, there we go. There's an interesting one. All right. Good. Glad you can hear me loud and clear. So we're going to kick off at 1 o'clock, which is in exactly 1 minute. We've got people coming in right now. And what we'll do is we'll just roll into this, and then we'll do our afterglow at the end, and we'll hang out a little bit and chat and shout outs and all the fun stuff. So how are you guys doing? Are you excited? 2021 is here. We finally got rid of 2020. And let's see where we're going. 42 seconds. Happy New Year. Thank you, Polka Dot Studio. Good to see you again. Rod Shelley, good to see you. Yep, it was a crazy day, Rod. Good to see you there. Nils from Sweden. Trent, good to see you. Bruce is in the house, our happy moderator. So any questions, Bruce will be taking your drink orders, and don't forget to tip him. We got from Colorado, good to see you. All right, here's a countdown, guys. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and I've completely messed it up because I'm looking at the wrong screen. All right, let's get started. Hey everyone. So that was an interesting countdown. I know I was a few seconds off there because I was looking at my main screen as a little bit of a delay, but good to see you all, and welcome to Live from Lockdown episode number 38. So this is our 38th episode of being in the wonderful lockdown. Of course, it's been a little bit longer than that because there's been a few weeks we missed, such as, Christmas holidays and stuff like that. But it's good to see all of you guys again, or virtually, and at least, you can see my face this week. I know sometimes I'll take my glasses off so I can take off this mask so I can look at you with my own eyes. That was my Darth Vader impersonation. Really bad. But anyway, so I'm really excited to see you all guys here. So we're starting a new year, 2021. Happy New Year. Good riddance, 2020. And let's hope, fingers crossed, that this is going to be better. And I know as far as lockdowns, there's been some new lockdowns in UK. Here we are in California. We're on curfew. So here we all are once again coming back together again, where we're meeting every single Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to hang out and do Photoshop Lightroom and be part of our community. Now, a lot of you guys have not missed a single episode. If that's you, say hi in the chat. And I know a lot of the names there, Russ, Tracy, Stuart, like other ones have not missed any. It's fantastic. So anyway, guys, what we're going to be doing today, though, is I figured we'd kick off the year with just something a little bit new, or maybe something different. What I want to do is, I get asked so many times, people are confused between, all the different Lightrooms, between Photoshop, between Bridge, and I'm always asked the question, what should I use? Should I use Bridge? Do I need Bridge? Do I need Lightroom? What's Lightroom Classic? What's Lightroom, why do I need to use Camera Raw? These are very common questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. We're going to look at the best workflows for working between them, but also the best workflows for different people. So the answer to all of those questions, should I use Bridge or should I use Lightroom? The answer to that depends on what you're doing, and maybe you should be using both. So let's just get started right now. I'm going to bring up my screen. Let's have a look. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring up Bridge. And here we are inside of Bridge. Now, these are some of the photos that you guys have been submitting for Fix My Photo, which we will be kicking off again pretty soon. But as you can see, this is a browser, not unlike what you can do in Lightroom. The big difference here is if you look in there, I'm choosing the folder, then I'm like, okay, there's another folder here. Oh, let me go back. Let me have a look in this one. And you can see we can browse it one photo or one folder at a time. Now, there's a little hack that we can do that we can show everything within here. So we've got all these subfolders within the folder. So imagine this is a filing cabinet. In each one of these are the different drawers. You can only open one at a time. But if you go on the little arrow here and you click and hold and choose show items from subfolders, you can open all those drawers at the same time. Notice this bar is moving up, and that's because it's populating with more and more images. So now I'm scrolling through, and this is all the photos that you guys have submitted for Lightroom Lockdown. Now, if I want to go up a level, I click up a level, up a level, up a level. But the problem is if I go to a level too high and I have too many photos, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Bridge is going to get really sluggish and crash because it's not designed to handle thousands of photographs. Now, there are some advantages we can do in Bridge over Lightroom. But before we do that, let me just jump over to Lightroom. And here we are inside of Lightroom. And as you can see, I've got subfolders here. But if I choose the folder above, it just shows everything like we would when we show all the files. And that's actually called file cruising or folder cruising. And as you can see here, this is Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic does this by default. If I wanted to show all of the images, I could just go to the very top here and choose all photographs. I got 72,000 photographs right now that we're displaying. And Lightroom is designed to be able to handle this. Now, what's the difference between the Lightrooms? And we're going to be unpacking a lot, so just to let you guys know, there is going to be, the replay will be done after this. So if you missed a little bit or, you need to go back and refresh, it's okay. And of course, we're going to be taking questions. So, queue up your questions. Don't post them just yet. Let's get through, a little bit of the basics, and then we can look at some of those. So, the difference between the different Lightrooms, we've got Lightroom Classic and then we've got Lightroom. So think of Lightroom as the ecosystem. So you have the Lightroom mobile on your phone. You have it on your iPad. It's actually in a web browser as well, believe it or not. Not everyone's aware of that. And also there's a browser-based version of Lightroom, which is just the LR, which is right there. So this is just our Lightroom. So if I launch this, you'll see Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. Okay, let's just reopen. I'm probably getting myself in trouble. No, it's fine. I'm not loading up too many. But here's some photos. Here I am a couple of years ago when I was in Hawaii. And, Comic-Con, different photos. And so basically these are photos that I've shot on my phone and then just synced with Lightroom. But as you can see, we also have a desktop version of it. So I have photos here that I've loaded up on my desktop and I've shared them. Now, this ecosystem syncs in the cloud. So you can store your photos locally, but it also syncs so they're available anywhere you go to Lightroom. So if you're on a phone, it's there. If you're on your iPad, it's there. You add a photo on the desktop, it appears on your phone. You edit it on your phone, it appears on your desktop. So it's a, everything, everywhere kind of a thing. So this is Adobe Lightroom, and this is the newer Lightroom. Now, let me just close that. We're going to go back to Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic is the Lightroom that we have known for years. This is the original Lightroom that everyone's been using. Now, the feature set's very similar. There's a few features inside of Lightroom Classic that are not in Lightroom yet, and I would assume over time most of those features will make their way in, or at least that's what's been happening. But the difference between Lightroom Classic and Lightroom is Lightroom Classic, all my photos are stored on hard drives. And if I look here, I can see Thunder Bay. This is my RAID. And you can see I've got different folders here. And most of my photos are in this Photos folder. And you can see I've got other folders there. So this is the folder view on my computer. So when I take my camera out, I upload those photos onto my computer into a specific folder, and then I bring them in here in Lightroom. Now, these are not synced in the cloud. However, you have the ability, if you look over this side here, you have the ability to sync these with one, you can sync one library. So essentially I can take one of these libraries and I can sync it, and it will, I can look at it on my mobile phone and I can choose one of these libraries to sync. So that means if I have Lightroom Classic on my laptop and I have Lightroom Classic on my desktop, I can't sync both of those with the cloud. I have to choose one or the other. That's where if you want everything in sync, use Lightroom. If you want to be dealing with more photos and you don't necessarily want to load them up into the cloud, then use Lightroom Classic. Now, a lot of the features are the same. The develop module's the same. It's just, slightly differently organized. So that's just kind of the difference between those different Lightrooms. Another question I get asked a lot, how many Lightroom catalogs should you have, or libraries? I have 3. I have one, which is, we can see here, it's got 72,000 images. This is my main images that I upload from, generally speaking, from my computer, from an actual, DSLR camera. Occasionally I might put a mobile photo in here, but not too often. I have another catalog, which is my mobile. So I take all the photos from my iPhones and all the photos from my Android phones, and I plug in the iPhone, launch Lightroom, and turn on the iPhone, and when you do that, you have access to the photos, and so I manually back those up. Even though I have, the Apple backup in the cloud, the iCloud or whatever, and the reason I do that is because after, at least, I don't know if they still do it, but after you get to a certain amount of photos, it would start deleting old photos. So I've actually lost photos from my iPhone, and they're there in a backup, but it backs up everything or restores everything. So those photos are kind of locked away and I can't get them, which is why I like to do the manual backup. Then I have a third catalog that I use, or a third library, which is all my aerial photos. I've got, probably close to 70,000 of those as well. And but I also do my videos and my photos on that other catalog. And I don't want to have, 150,000 photos in here, because when I'm looking for an aerial photo, I know I'm looking for something specific. If I'm looking for something from my DSLRs, different photo shoots, whatever, that's specific. And then also there is the, of course, the stuff from my mobile phone. All right, so there's also, I have one more catalog, which is the, not safe for work. And that's not necessarily because I have stuff that's bad. It's just I have stuff that's, client shoots and things like that are confidential, and I don't want to accidentally show them when I'm doing demos like I am right now. So those are locked away in a different library. So for a lot of people, you can be fine working with the one library. All right, so this is organization. Now, if you don't want to work in Lightroom, you don't have to. You can save all these images, and I can see all these images in these folders. And, at any time I can go in there and, I can access these photos. If I want to go in there, I can actually go in here and I can look at different things here. I can show in Finder. So if I go into the Finder, here they are. So Lightroom is not taking those photos away and locking them into a separate Lightroom thing, kind of like what Aperture used to do. If you guys used Aperture, I liked Aperture. It was a great application. But it put everything into its own folder, its own library, where only Aperture could access it. Lightroom doesn't do that. All it does is create a reference for those images. And the good thing about that is, even though I've got all these photos in Lightroom, I can still access them from Bridge. And some people might decide, hey, I don't want to use Lightroom. I want to use Bridge. Well, that's fine. You can browse to those images here inside of Bridge. Now, there's a lot of things you can do. You can do keywording. A lot of the things that you can do inside of Lightroom, you can do with Adobe Bridge. Now, the advantage in Lightroom, of course, is the ability to search through multiple libraries, multiple folders, collections at once. So it handles more photos a lot easier. And everything's in one place. So, I don't have to go through folders trying to find things. I can find them. Oh, there's JP, John Paul Capronegro. I don't know if you guys know him. And some memories in here. Sometimes I go down memory lane when I open these up as well. So, that's kind of the, the fun thing about it. So, we've got more here, and you can see I can just go into each folder and I can access these photos. And then the collection is something that I can create myself. So when I create these, collections, it doesn't create another copy of the photo. All it does is it creates a new reference. So there's a lot of things we can do in organizing our photos in Lightroom. If you're working with photographs and you're shooting photos, you're a photographer, you should be using Lightroom. Now, let's go back to Bridge. And there's some things you can do in Bridge. If you're a graphic designer, you definitely want to be using Bridge. And the reason for that is Bridge supports more than just photos. If you look here, there's a Microsoft Word file here. There's a text file. It supports PDFs. It supports different formats. Now, there's another big thing that is supported inside of Bridge that's not supported inside of Camera Raw, and that's CMYK images. So if you're doing print work and you're a designer, you can view CMYK images inside of Bridge, but you can't view those inside of Lightroom. Now, when we think of Bridge, and let's use one of your guys' photos here, and if I click on this photo here, we can see there's a photo. And by the way, there's different workspaces that we can do in here, and we can just click and we can choose different workspaces. See that? And there's different parts here, the libraries, film strips. And if we go to the output, we can create, all kinds of things. So you can see here, we can do context sheets. We can do a lot of the things we do inside of Lightroom can also be done here, but it's just, it's just not quite as easy. But, we can, start to lay things out. We can do these things inside of Bridge and very easily. Now, if we want to see anything about the photo, let me just go there. Let's go back to the essentials. And here's our metadata. I can see this is a raw file. So if we are inside of Adobe Bridge and I double click on a photo, it's going to bring it into Camera Raw. Now, this is the same as if we were inside of Lightroom Classic or Lightroom, and we want to work on the photo, we choose the Develop module. Now we're in the Develop module, and we have this set of tools. If you go into Bridge, when we double click it, it goes into Camera Raw, we have exactly the same tools. So the tools inside of Photoshop and Lightroom are the same. The big difference between Photoshop and Lightroom is designed for working with lots and lots of photos. Say, for example, I want to bring some more photos here into Camera Raw. I can't do that from here. If I choose File, notice that it's grayed out. I would have to exit out of here, go back into Bridge, and let me do that. Let me hit Cancel. And let's go to Bridge and say I want to open more than one image. Well, I can select these multiple images, double click, and now we're going to see these are going to load into the film strip on the side here. So as you can see, if you're working with bulk photos and you're working very quickly, Lightroom is much, much quicker for working with all those individual photos. Now, the good news is when we make these adjustments here inside of Camera Raw and we save those, these are the same adjustments that we get inside of Lightroom. So your work is not necessarily wasted. So if you go in and you do work inside of Bridge, that information can be shared with Lightroom using metadata or XMP sidecars. So let me just cancel out of here. And let's go back to Bridge. And you have the ability to create that metadata. So when I go in here and I change things, let's click on the metadata view. We can see, hey, here's our metadata. And look at this. There's our EXIF information. And of course, these folders, you can move things over. Let me drag it over to the other side here. And we'll put that there. And I can go in between. So you have, the ability to kind of just go in here and do different things. But I could edit these. If I wanted to go in and edit some of this information, I could. And we can see this is Anders' photograph. I don't know if you're there. If you are, say hi. And if you look on the side here, you see these little marks there. So IPTC is generally where you're going to put your stuff in here. This is where you put your name or your information, keywords. And we could go in here, as long as you see a little pencil there, I can click in here and I can type nature, and it adds that keyword now in there. So I can do all this work inside of Bridge. It's just a lot more cumbersome. And if I want to apply that, let's click there. So now that's saved that keyword. So that keyword nature is now going to travel with that file. Now, when I say it's going to travel with that file, it's going to travel as a sidecar file. So when you talk about raw files, so when you're shooting in JPEGs or TIFFs, which I don't recommend doing unless you don't have any other options, when you put this information, it just writes it into the file. So it has a header in that file, so it travels with the file. When you're using a DNG file, which is a digital negative, it will do the same thing. But if you are working with a RAW file such as a NEF, which is a Nikon RAW file, or a CRW, or a RAF from that would, or the Sony, so we've got all the different brands, right? So, that'd be Panasonic, I believe. Is the RAF Panasonic? I've got one of the. No, it's Fuji. RAF is Fuji. CRW is Canon. So we write these different formats. You can't write into them. They're proprietary RAW files that those manufacturers don't give you access to write into those files. You can read the information, and then you can go into Lightroom, you can go into Camera Raw, you can make those adjustments, but you can't write in there. So it creates a little file next to it, a little text file called an XMP sidecar. So that's what a sidecar file is. All right. So I know this is heavy and, maybe a little technical. So don't worry. We're going to go in and do some practical stuff in just 1 second. So I'm just going to click back here. We've got our essentials there. And you can just kind of see how we can just choose how we want to view these files. So now the big difference between working with Lightroom and Bridge. If I right click and I choose to open in Camera Raw, or I double click on a RAW file, this is going to open it into Camera Raw. Okay, great. If I go into Lightroom Classic or Lightroom and I choose to edit in Photoshop, this is also going to open it in Photoshop, but you've got to get down to open it as a smart object in Photoshop. And we'll go through this in more detail, but let me just give you... So now it goes into Photoshop. And if you want to get it into Camera Raw, let me just reset all my panels here. Then notice it's a smart object, double click, and now it will go into Camera Raw. So this is essentially doing the same thing. But there's a second way of going into Camera Raw from Photoshop. And don't worry if you're getting a little confused. This is going to come together. We can go under Filter, and we can choose Camera Raw Filter. Okay, so why would you open it in Photoshop and then go into Camera Raw versus opening it directly from Bridge or Lightroom? Okay, so if you look at this, when we open this as a Camera Raw filter, you don't get cropping. And there's some features that you have inside of Camera Raw that are not going to be available if you open it from a filter inside of Photoshop. So if you want to have real control over this RAW file, what you need to do is one of two things. Either one, if you're working in Lightroom, do your cropping, do your basic adjustments inside of Lightroom before you take it into Photoshop, because once you take it into Photoshop, you can't resize it. Now, however, if you go from Bridge and we double click, open it in Camera Raw, notice the crop tools here, and we have the ability to rotate, to crop, to straighten, all of these things. So if you want to work on a photograph like this, and you want to have control over the formatting as well as just the visuals, you want to open it directly from Bridge. So that's answering a question that I get, like, should you open it as a filter or should you open it directly from Bridge? So if you're opening it directly from Bridge, you have access to all the tools. which would be the same as if you're inside of Lightroom Classic going to the Develop module. You also have access to all the tools. So, the adjustments in the way we work are the same. All these sliders are the same in Camera Raw or Lightroom. So one of the things, so really what it comes down to is, are you using Lightroom, and this is where it's going to come together. Are you using Lightroom to manage your photos? Yes or no? If you're using Lightroom to manage your photos, then you're going to start in Lightroom. If you are not using Lightroom to manage your photos, then you're going to start in Bridge. And the best place to start is if you're in here is you want to open this into the Camera Raw. Let me just cancel that. And I'm just going to close this out. So don't open it into Photoshop yet. What you want to do is if you're working from Bridge, you're going to double click and you're going to open this first of all into Camera Raw. Then you can do cropping, straightening, all of these things, and do your basic adjustments. That's where we're going to start. And why don't we just do some of that right now? Okay, so we're going to do some basic adjustments right now. Let's just get us started somewhere. Lovely photo, by the way, Andy. I don't know if you're here. If you are, say hi. Oh, I like that, nice and warm. Look at beautiful little squirrel. And, maybe we want to crop this. Okay, so let's go in here. We're going to crop this down. And I'm just going to manually crop it. I'm not necessarily going to go for an aspect ratio. If you want to lock it to an aspect ratio, you can. You just go under here. So if you like, hey, I need to keep this as a 4:5, that's fine. And by the way, the X key will switch between vertical, horizontal. All right, let's do that. And we're just going to click, and it's going to apply it. So, okay, so we've started there inside of Camera Raw. And now I want to open it in Photoshop. Now see where it says open? Click on the little arrow, and you see you have an option to open. Open as an object or a copy. Now what you want to do is you want to open this as an object, because this will keep it as a smart object, which means it will be non-destructive. Now if you want to change this permanently, you can click on this little hyperlink at the bottom, and then under File Handling, or one of these, Workflow maybe, we can choose here, Photoshop. Open in Photoshop is a smart object. Click OK, and notice now by default that's going to change to Open Object. You can still click on here and change it. And another tip, if you're on Open Object, if you hold the Shift key, it'll change to Open. So you can toggle. Now, the difference between Open Object and Open is this is going to open it like a photograph. So it's just going to be pixels. So at this point, you're going to lose the ability to go back into Camera Raw and have it as a raw file. It's basically going to convert it into, like a TIFF or a PSD file. However, if you open Object, which is what we're going to do right now, it's going to launch it in Photoshop. And this is the best way to work. And now we can make adjustments. We can create adjustment layers. Let me do a curves adjustment. And so now we have the ability to do different things. But if you want to go back to that raw file, because it's a smart object, I can double click. It will go back into Camera Raw. And because we opened this originally from Bridge, we have the ability to change some of this. We can reset this crop. So if I, choose I believe this is the reset button, click OK, and it updated it. Now we might have lost some of that, but we can get it back if we go into the crop tool. And see how nothing is thrown away. If we don't like that curve, let me get rid of that curve. Great. Turn that off. And notice we can go back. So nothing is thrown away. Nothing is lost. We're working completely non-destructively because we chose to work with the smart object. Now, let's go back and let's go to Lightroom. So say you're not working from Bridge, you're working from Lightroom. We can do exactly the same thing. Let's go down here. Let's find something like stadium photo. Great. Let's go to the Develop module. this is too dense. I want to reduce the contrast in here. There we go. That's much better. And let's recover some of the highlights. Let's open up some of the shadows. There we go. We're reducing that density in this image. And it was a little bit warm too. Let's pull it back. That's a typical, I believe this is a Phantom 4 DJI, and a very typical way that shoots like that. All right, so let's just go in here, just make some more adjustments. And we're just playing around with this photo. Let's go here. Let's even reduce the contrast even more. Great. Now we want to open it in Photoshop. So you do your preliminary adjustment right here inside of Lightroom. The develop module, once again, what we were doing in the develop module here is exactly the same as what we were doing in Camera Raw. Now, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose to open in Photoshop, or edit in Photoshop, but we're not going to choose edit here. This would be the same as open. Remember when we were in Camera Raw and we saw the option that we could open or we could open as an object. This is opening. Edit in. Open as a smart object is opening as an object. So let's do that instead. And this is going to take us into Photoshop. And here we go. And look at this. We now have exactly the same. We've got that smart object. So at this point inside of Photoshop, there is no difference in opening this from Bridge or opening it from Lightroom. And the nice thing about it is when we work with Lightroom like we just did, and we do this as a smart object, I can double click, and this is going to take me into Camera Raw, and notice all the sliders are still intact. These are the adjustments I made in Lightroom, and now we're in Camera Raw. I can undo what I did, or I can keep working, and I'm working on the DNG, so this is the raw file right now that I'm working on. And you can see that this is completely non-destructive, and also that file that I started off in Lightroom, I took it to Photoshop. Now I'm working on it in Camera Raw. So as you can see there, I'm packing some different, it is Crow's Field actually. In Denver, you're right, Tracy and Ken. So as you can see, we've got an incredible amount of flexibility in our workflow. So this is when I would use Lightroom and Photoshop together. Let's just back up because I really want to keep this really, really simple. So either you're using Lightroom, if you were going to create a flowchart, right? You're using Lightroom to manage your photos, yes or no? If yes, then you start in Lightroom. If no, are you using Bridge to manage your photos? Yes or no? If yes, then you're going to be opening from Bridge into Camera Raw. If no, well, you're going to be using the other application, Aperture or Photos or whatever it is. You're going to open those images into Camera Raw from there, or into Photoshop from there. So depending on what you're using to manage your photos, that's really where you're going to decide where step one is. So after that, we open in Camera Raw. Now, if you're working in Lightroom, this is what I suggest. Do your preliminary adjustments, like get it how you like it, bring it into Photoshop as a smart object, and then we have the ability to go in and make these adjustments at any time. And, you know, because we've got that smart object, we can go back in. Now, what happens in Lightroom once I open it in Photoshop? What if I save this file? What happens? Well, right now, if we look inside of Lightroom Classic, there's our file there. What I want to do is I want to make sure that this is selected, and I'm going under Library, and I want to make sure I can see all my photos. So I'm going to go up to the top here, and I'm going to choose All Photos. I'm going to click on All Photos, so all my photos are visible, but I'm still viewing the same photo, but what it's doing is just allowing access here. So 70,000 photos are in this film strip now. All right, so that photo's there. So this one, let's have a look at the name of it. If we go in the library, this is where we do all our metadata. This is where we do all the keyword working, just like we would inside of Bridge. Same, here's our data here, our metadata. This is our EXIF data, extended data. We can put all this stuff in here. And if we look at this file, we can see this is a DNG file. That's the name of it. It's a raw file. Okay, let's go into Photoshop. Because if you look in Lightroom, there's no save button. There isn't one in Bridge either. But there is in Photoshop. So if I choose File, and then I just choose Save. Notice it just saved it. Let's go to Lightroom. What happened? Well, if you look at it, you're going to see, let me scroll, oh, I scrolled way too fast. Let me scroll here. Let me go back to it. Of course, I went and scrolled out. Well, you can see them down here. So we've got 1 and 2. So what it does is it creates a stack. And if you look at that stack, there we go. There's 1 and 2. So what it's done is here's the original image right there. Look on the file name. We can see that now we have a TIFF. Click back one, DNG, same file, but then we go forward. Now we get the copy of it, which, wow, I'm messing myself up here. There we go. Here's the 2 there. Let me click on them on the film strip. Gets a little twiddly sometimes because I'm working on a very lower res than I normally do on my screen. So, okay, so there's 1 and 2. So you can see the 2 images there. So there's our original file, and then there's a TIFF file. So what it does is when you're working inside of Photoshop, it creates, when you hit save, it saves a copy and automatically imports that back into Lightroom. Now, why would it do that? Why would that even be useful? Why would you want to do that? Well, a lot of reasons. Lightroom doesn't support layers, but you can have layered files in Lightroom. Let me demonstrate. So here I am. I've got this. Let me, let's do a gradient map. And so let's apply an adjustment. So we're going to choose our adjustment layers here. And let's apply a gradient map to this image. I'm not going to go through and explain all the ins and outs of these because I have other videos where I explain gradient maps and different things. What I want you to understand right now is we are just, let me just change this to color blend mode, and we'll drop the opacity down. I just want you to see an adjustment on here. So there we go. So we've got some kind of an interesting adjustment. And in fact, let me make it stronger so we can really see it. So this is not how I would normally do an image, but I want it to just look different. So if we look at it there, and then we go back into Lightroom Classic, it still looks the same. But if we go to Photoshop and we hit Save, Control S for Save, and let's go back to Lightroom Classic, notice it updates the copy. So this is why it creates a copy, because I can't apply Photoshop adjustment layers inside of Lightroom. So what it does is it leaves your original image intact, and then it brings in that TIFF file. And you can choose in the preferences whether you want it to be a TIFF or a PSD. And then we don't have to bring it in. So whenever we hit that save button, it automatically imports it. Now, it does create a file. So if I right click on here and I choose to show in Finder, it actually creates a file. There's the TIFF file. So it is creating an image, but it's automatically importing this here. So the nice thing about the fact that it's also creating an image means that I could access this from Bridge or Premiere Pro or any other application, InDesign, whatever I want. It's creating an actual physical file and it's importing it here. So this is nice. So it's automatically bringing it back into Lightroom for us to manage our photos. Now, of course, if I convert this to CMYK, it's not going to understand that. So you would need to have to go into Bridge for that. But that's for designers. If you're a photographer, you won't be using CMYK. All right, so let's have a look here. Let's look at some other things. So why don't we duplicate this layer? Let's hit Control J. I'll drag it above it. And I'm going to right click and I'm just going to rasterize the layer. I just want to do some things. So let's just apply a blur. Once again, we just want to make it look a little different. Let's apply this blur here. Great. Let's change the blend mode to overlay. Just get kind of an autumny effect, but we're going to be blending it with that other color. So let's just bring this in. Okay, so we're getting in, just an interesting effect. Let's create another layer just for the sake of it. Let's put a gradient on it. And why don't we change this to a black to transparent gradient. Let's choose it in here. Oh, my foreground's set to red. That's why. Let me just hit cancel. I'm setting my foreground color to black. And let's go in and do that again. So let's go choose a gradient. There we go. So we'll get our foreground, and maybe I want to do some kind of a split neutral density effect. So I'm going to put this gradient in the top, and I'm going to change the blend mode of this to something like overlay. So we just wanted to say we wanted to darken the sky. Okay, so there we go. All right, so let's hit save, and let's close this. And let's close everything. So we've got nothing open in Photoshop now. Let's go back to Lightroom Classic. Here we are in Lightroom Classic, and notice those adjustments have been made. So let me double click. There's our image. So here's a beautiful thing about this. When we right click, we choose edit in. Now we don't want to open this as a smart object right now, because we're working with a TIFF. So there's no need to open this as a smart object, because we are not going back to that raw file right now. We are, but you'll see in a second. But we don't want to convert this into a smart object, because then it's just going to be one flattened layer. We want to edit that original. So the way to do that is we choose edit in Photoshop, just like we did before, and we get this menu. Maybe you guys have seen this menu before, and you've wondered what it does. So if I choose edit original, this is going to open up the original file. So let's do this. We're going to choose edit. We go into Photoshop, and look at this. There is our layered document inside of Photoshop. So even though we were saving that in Lightroom, we didn't lose any of our layers. Once again, when you go to open, don't open as a smart object anymore, because this is the copy we're working on. You want to open in Photoshop and then choose original, and look at this. So now I can say, hey, I don't like that gradient map anymore. In fact, I don't like this autumn effect. This gradient map, I'm going to choose a different color. So we're now making edits in here, and maybe we'll do something in greens. I don't know. Let's go matrix. And once again, this is just so we can see it, but let's bring that down just a little bit. And then I want to go back to the original smart object. There it is. That smart object is linked to that original raw file. So if we double click here, boom, here it is. All those settings are back again. So let's go back in. We can make all of, so we've lost nothing. We're working completely non-destructive. And when I hit save, you guys guessed it, what it's going to do is going to go back into Lightroom, and boom, it updates that file. So there's that file in Lightroom. Now let's go into Photoshop, and I'm just going to close this out. So what do these other options do? So if we choose here, edit in, and we choose to edit in Photoshop 2021. Okay, so what we have the ability to do here, this is where we get an issue. If I choose edit copy, it's just going to create a whole new copy of that file, and that'll give us a third copy, so we could do a variation. So that's basically a fork in the road. But edit a copy of Lightroom adjustments is interesting. So let me just hit cancel. What if I go into the develop module here and I change something here inside of Lightroom? Notice we didn't get those adjustments anymore, because we're not working on the original raw file. We're working on this TIFF file that we created. Let me go really warm, just so we can see, let's give it a whole, let's just go for a different look so we can see clearly that we're working on a different file. Okay. Now, if I choose to edit this, edit in Photoshop, see that, how that image looks, and we choose edit original, boom, look, there it is, and all those adjustments we made in Lightroom are gone. We don't have those adjustments. So let's cancel that. Let's go back to the image, and if I'd saved that, we would have lost this. So if we choose edit in Photoshop, now this is where you might edit a copy, because you might want to go a different area. But if we choose to edit this with our Lightroom adjustments, now we're going to choose edit. Notice what happens. There's those adjustments that came from Lightroom, and look at this. Now it's flattened. we've lost all our layers. And if I hit save, Control S for save, and then we go back into Lightroom. Let me double click to go back into the library. Look what it did. It created another copy. So we didn't lose our adjustments. So if we look here, here's our original raw file. Here's our one that we just did. It's called Edit. And then look at the names here. See that? Edit. So that's the newer one that we did. Because if I try to open this inside of Photoshop, choose Edit in Photoshop, and I choose Edit Original, we're not going to get those layers because it applied those Lightroom adjustments. So I wanted to bring those Lightroom adjustments into Photoshop and start, basically a variation. But if I go back here, here's our edit. Because it created a new copy, Lightroom is smart enough to say, hey, let's not throw away all those adjustments. They might want those again. Right-click, choose Edit in Photoshop once again, and now we're going to go Edit Original, click Edit, and boom, there's our layers. So you're always going to go back and do that. So each time you create some kind of a variation that's going to be a destructive operation, Lightroom is going to create another copy. So maybe right now you guys are starting to see why some of the advantages in using Lightroom to work with your photos. You guys starting to see that maybe. And one of the things I did want to just let you guys just quickly I want to mention, because some of you might be like, oh my gosh, okay, now I see why I should be using Lightroom, but man, I haven't been using Lightroom and I want to learn Lightroom. So I don't do this, I never do this, but I'm just going to mention, because this is a service to you guys, I want to mention a course that I have. Let me go in here somewhere. I've got the thing where I can go to my, let me just bring it up on photoshopCAFE. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm not trying to sell you guys on this. But, a lot of you are already aware of this. You're CAFE crew guys. So just go to photoshopcafe.com, click on Premium Tutorials. And if you're wanting to learn Lightroom, I've got the course here, Lightroom Classic. And this will teach you from the ground up. It's ridiculously comprehensive. It's like 100 and... How many lessons do I have in this thing? 140, 150 lessons. So this goes all the way through everything in Lightroom. And I just want to let you guys know that if you haven't used Lightroom, you want to learn Lightroom, this is the best way. And Bruce has also got a discount code. So I'll give you guys 20% discount on that. And we'll leave that discount open for a week. And that code will also work on anything in Photoshop. So if you haven't used Lightroom and you're like, hey, I really want to get into Lightroom, that resource will help you guys. And that's at photoshopcafe.com, and then just go under the products here and you can see Lightroom Classic 2020. And then that code is, what is that code, Bruce? LFL21. And if you use that, that'll help you, and that'll teach you everything about Lightroom. All right, so let's continue for the rest of you guys. Let's go back to Lightroom Classic, and you can see this is really quite useful. So there's a lot of things we can do in Lightroom Classic, such as creating panoramas and HDRs and, and doing our adjustments. So essentially all these photos that I shot here, I did an aerial panorama with with my drone. And you can see I didn't fly over the stadium because that's illegal. But you can stitch them together and create these really cool panoramas, big panoramas like that, or maybe something not quite so extreme. And so this is generally what I'll do is I'll put all of these together. This is the DNG file. Then I'll go into the develop module here, and this is the whole workflow. So once you have the image, make your adjustments. I'm going to lower that contrast. I kind of like the smoky kind of feel, but I didn't like that high dense contrast. So let me just bring the blacks off, bring the whites off. And so here's a workflow now. So I'm taking this from Lightroom, and you can see Lightroom is managing my photos. Now, if you were working in Bridge, you could do the same thing. But when you want to create a variation, you would have to save out a copy of that file. Let me open this. Edit as Smart Object in Photoshop. So we've kind of covered that. So when you're in Lightroom, all you got to do is save it, and it's going to create a copy inside of there. Now, if you're working here and you want to do something to it and work in layers and start, like maybe I want to do some dodging and burning. So let's just quickly do that. So I'm going to create a new layer, holding down the Alt or the Option key, and I'm just going to put this into overlay blend mode. And we've got I've done so many tutorials on dodging and burning, and of course we've done this inside of, Live from Lockdown. We've done this many times. So I'm just going to click OK, and we just created a layer there, and say I just wanted to just do a manual vignette. So I'm just going to choose a black brush right now. So I'm choosing black as a foreground color. And I'm choosing a brush. Let's go up here. We're going to use a nice soft edge brush, which is hardness 0. And I was going to use my Wacom tablet. I've got my pen here, but I've got my tablets unplugged. It's in the studio because I used that for my gear demo, so I'll have that set up soon when I did that gear of the year. You can check it out there on YouTube or photoshopCAFE, my gear picks for the year. All right, so the reason we're creating an overlay blend mode filled with gray is this is non-destructive and it doesn't do anything until we paint with black or white. So we're going to take out black. So what I'm doing is I'm burning right now. Let's make it really big. I'm just creating a vignette. Of course, it doesn't look good yet. Let's reduce our opacity and just dial in a little bit. So we're just creating a little vignette there. Okay, so now if I wanted to work on this from Bridge and I'm not working from Lightroom, say I'd open it from Bridge, what I would have to do is choose File, Save As, and then I would go into the same folder, which is, here it's going into the source folder, which is the Colorado folder. I don't believe I have that open in Bridge right now. So why don't I go to my desktop, and I know I'm working from Live from Lockdown, and we've got our photos to fix. No, we've got Live from Lockdown. We've got our live stream. It's in here somewhere. You know what? I'm sorting by date. I hate that. Let's just change that to name or none. All right, there we go. Fix my photo, and I'm going to save it here. So I'm going to hit save. Great. So I've saved the copy. Now, if I'm working in Bridge, if I'm working on Lightroom, I don't have to do anything. If I'm in Bridge, let me choose Fix My Photo, and there it is. So we can access it there from Bridge. So as you can see, Bridge will do a lot of the same things you can do in Lightroom, but you have to do a lot of stuff manually, and you have to do stuff individually. So if you're working on images, like you don't have a ton of images and you're just working on one image at a time and spending a lot of time, maybe you're doing illustration work or graphic design, and you don't have, camera rolls, you're just working on individual photos, a folder and navigating to that folder in Bridge is going to work fine. If you're working and you're shooting your own photos or you're working with a lot of photos, then you want to be using Lightroom. Now, if you have Lightroom already, which I don't think you can get Photoshop right now without getting Lightroom, with the Creative Cloud package, you already have it. So, why not use it? Would kind of be my thing. That's what I suggest. So as you can see, we can go in here, we can work on this, and once again, I can double click because I opened it as a smart object. Always work as a smart object. Now we have a previous Live from Lockdown where we are doing smart objects. I don't know if Bruce can find it. But the easy way, let me just tell you guys, to find the previous episodes of these, just go to YouTube and go to the photoshopCAFE channel, and which you're watching this on YouTube right now. Now, if you guys have not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, and that will let you guys know whenever I upload a new episode. I'm not pitching my Lightroom Classic course here. I'm going to show you guys how to get to these Live from Lockdown replays. So you can either do it on YouTube. Under photoshopCAFE, you'll see the live streams, or you can go photoshopcafe.com, go to the free tutorials, and you'll see live streams here, and you can click, and all the live streams are there. So there's the replays. So if you want to look at a previous Live from Lockdown, it's here. So, if we were doing things like, smart objects, there we go. Live from Lockdown, episode number 22, what's the big deal about smart objects? Check that out, and that will go in depth into smart objects, and you'll understand why we want to use smart objects here, because smart objects are the way to work, because they just give you so much more control. than anything else. Okay, so let's go here. What I want to do is I want to reduce the overall saturation. So I'm going to take the saturation down. And this reduces our master saturation, or the saturation in the most saturated areas. Look at the video I just did recently on YouTube in photoshopCAFE. What's the difference between vibrance and saturation? Check that out. So I want to increase this vibrance now. And so we're popping certain colors without popping the other colors. So we're just changing the color here. Basically, I just want to make an adjustment. And I just felt like this image was way too dense. Now I'm clicking OK. It's going to update it. And now notice we've got a lot less density in this image than we had from the original. So it's like, yeah, cool. So you can make all your adjustments. And at this point here, if you want to print, you can print from here inside of Photoshop. Now, if you were in Lightroom, you have all these other modules. So you have the print module. So I can go in here and I can create, different templates. We've got templates here that come with it for printing. If I want to do a 4x6 or I want to do multiple photos. So this kind of gives you the ability inside the print module to do different layouts. Context sheets. We've got all these kinds of things we can do here, or we can just individually just choose to print one. So you choose the printer here, and I would not be using that. Oh, I haven't added. That's right, I upgraded to the Mac Pro, so I haven't added my printer yet. So I would go in here and add my printer, which would be an Epson. We're not going to do that right now, but you would go in here, set up your printer. So whatever printer you're using, set that up there under printer, and then choose your parameters, and then you choose print. So we can do that. We can create web galleries. And I probably shouldn't have clicked on here because right now this is building a web gallery of 70,000, almost 71,000 photos. So that's probably a little much. Same with slideshows. If you click on slideshows, it'll create a slideshow out of whatever's in this film strip. Or you can choose selected photos. So this will choose all the photos. This will choose selected or just flagged. So all the work you do here inside of Lightroom, you can replicate. So if I just want to choose selected photos, let me just hold down the control key. And I'm going to create, now it's creating a slideshow out of 4 images. See that? And if I hit the play, I can add music. I can do all that. And it will prepare the slideshow. And here we go. There we go. Now it's playing the slideshow with the 4 images. Okay, so let me just hit the pause button. So as you know, we have the ability to do that. So the library, this is the same as Bridge. But it enables us to work with all of those folders in a much easier way. This is where we can do all that keywording. This is where, think of this as a library. Literally, a library. You've got shelves, you've got drawers, you've got all your photos organized into folders, drawers, collections. This is where you put color tabs and different things like that in here. This is where you sort and organize your photos. Same thing as you would do in Bridge. Develop module. Now you go in, take one photo at a time, make the adjustments. This is think of this as our photo lab. This is where we're making, or our darkroom. This is where we're making adjustments. When we're in Bridge, when we have in these folders, like now, this is the library module. It's not as easy to work with multiple photos, but it's here. And most of those features, if not all the features, are here inside of the library module. When you open it inside of Camera Raw, now you're in the Develop module. Now, there's things we can do inside of Lightroom, such as the maps and the books, that we don't have those ability to do so much inside of Bridge. But when you're inside of Bridge here, we do have the ability to go into our output. And we can see this is similar to what we would do in the print module. And we can create these different templates with multiple photos. We can do all this, and we can export these as PDFs, or we can take those PDFs into Photoshop, or we can export them as images. We've got all the ability to do different things here. So this is the same as using the print module inside of Lightroom, except obviously the print module, everything's in one place. Same with the web. I believe it's still here in Bridge, where you can create web galleries. Let's have a look here and see what we can still do. I haven't used these in years for obvious reasons because I'm doing it inside of Lightroom. But you can see, you know, we've got all our tools. Where are we? Let's go through here. Here's our tools. Here we go. So under Photoshop, this is where we can do a contact sheet. We can do all these kinds of things right here. So an image processor allows us to process multiple images. So we can do batch processing with our images as well. And this is where you would do it inside of Bridge. So as you can see, a lot of the same features or tools that you'll find inside of Lightroom, you can find these inside of Photoshop and inside of Bridge. So there's a lot of similarities between the two. And what it really comes down to is convenience of workflow. So yeah, so hopefully this kind of helps you guys a little bit. And let's jump in and we're going to do some questions and answers. So guys, drop your questions. You got your questions ready there. Do me a favor, drop those in. And do me another favor, if you're getting any value out of this at all, hit that like button. That's the thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm. It helps people discover these videos and these tutorials that we're doing. All right, so let's have a look. I'm going to bring up my phone here because Bruce is helping with some of the questions. And let's have a look. I have the chat pod there, and I'll go in there and I'll do that in a second. But let's go in and do that here. So what I'm going to do, though, I'm just going to do a soft ending for those of you who have got to go or not necessarily doing the questions and answers. One of the first things I always get, will there be a replay? Yes, this replay will be available. It usually takes about 15 minutes or so for YouTube to make that available for everybody. And that's, essentially that's that. So I'm going to answer all the questions. We're going to hang out. We're going to do what we call afterglow. And afterglow is essentially, we all chat, we talk to each other, and do questions and answers and all that. But for those of you who have to go, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, become part of the Cafe crew. Thanks for joining us here at Live from Lockdown. Hit that subscribe button and the like button if you like this. And until next time, I'll see you at the cafe. And now, for everybody else, let's continue. We're going to do our questions and answers. For those of you who've got to go, I understand it's been an hour. Thanks for coming. Happy New Year. Happy 2021 to you guys. Thanks for those guys of you who had to, who are here every week. I'm going to look at the questions now. We're going to jump into this. And but I know some of you have to go. So I'll see you guys later. And the rest of us, let's hang out for a little bit. Let me get these questions. Here we go. There's Bruce. All right. Whoa, okay, we got a few questions here. So PhotoMaker asks, does using Lightroom across platforms, so the syncing use a cloud memory we all pay for our subscriptions? Yes. Yes, it does. Now, I believe the Lightroom might come with its own storage package. I forget that. If you go on the Adobe site, you can definitely check that out. So yes, it does. So you might want to be, not necessarily sharing all your photos, but they're just the ones you might need on different devices. PhotoMaker. Lightroom catalogs get changed or modified in any way from year for the annual updates. No, when you do the updates, well, actually, yes. Let me expand on that. Okay, so when you guys do the updates every year, definitely check out my video on what to do before you do the update. It'll save you some pain. But if you've checked that out and you kind of have a checklist of the things to do, it doesn't move any photos. It doesn't alter any photos at all. All it does is will update that catalog to a newer version of the catalog, which is just essentially if you're using an older version of Lightroom, you might not be able to open that catalog very well. You can always open the old catalogs in the new version of Lightroom. But if you upgrade that catalog, it might be harder to open it in the previous version. You can open it sometimes, but it's not going to work necessarily because there's new features inside of Lightroom. So let me give you an example. If you're on the latest version of Lightroom and you just ran an update to your catalog, well, one of the things that changed was your presets. You've got all your presets there. They're still going to work. But if you look, let me just put you on the screen here. One of the things you might have noticed is color grading is here now. And before it used to be split toning. So what it does is it just upgrades it to the latest process version, and it will convert your presets to work with the color grading preset. So everything will still work. So that's what it's doing. It's just kind of updating things. So yes, it will kind of change things. But also what it does is when you update that catalog, don't be worried like, well, what if I want to downgrade it? Is Adobe locking me in? No, because when you upgrade the catalog, it creates a copy of that catalog and it saves your original catalog. So it's still there. So if you decide, hey, I don't like this version, I want to go back to my older version of Lightroom, you can. That earlier catalog's there. So it doesn't replace it, but it creates a new one alongside it. And if you go under your Lightroom preferences and catalog settings, here, your catalog settings, you can find, all your settings where you're, maybe back to the general, did I mess it up? But let me go back. Sorry, guys. So go into your preferences, and here we are. You can optimize your catalog. You can go in there. You can find your catalog, and just go to your folder where your catalog is. And then if you look under there, you'll see the older catalogs. I think I've more than answered that question. All right. Can contact sheets be created in Photoshop? I think we answered that. Yes, we can. You saw that from Bridge when I exported it. When we get a sidecar with our proprietary raw images but not DNG, well, the reason for that is with the DNG, it can write into the file. So Adobe has access because DNG is an open source and also Adobe created it, so it can write into that folder. So inside of that DNG is, the metadata can be edited. Whereas a proprietary raw file, it cannot be edited, so that's why it creates that sidecar file. If you want to create a sidecar file with your DNGs, you can. It's just a preference. So, but I would write into the files. It's much better because you can't accidentally lose things. So that I would definitely recommend that. All right, so Matt at the top, what about directly editing in Lightroom? Yeah, absolutely. Do all your edits in Lightroom. Do as much as you can. And then when you need to go to Photoshop, then open it in Photoshop. Now, Photoshop's going to be better for things like selection tools, if you're doing any layered work, things like dodging and burning. Even though we can do that here inside of Lightroom, it's better inside of Photoshop. So, some photos you'll never need to take them into Photoshop. A lot of them you can do all your adjustments right here in Lightroom. Absolutely. But if you need to go in Photoshop, take it in there and do those other tools. Would changes via ACR be reflected in Lightroom? Yes, but an indirect way. As you guys saw, if I wanted to change this file, as you saw, I would, here's one here, remember? When it creates that duplicate, right? So if I open this as a smart object, and then I go in, I make adjustments, and then I hit save, it's going to bring it back here. So it is going to be editable, but it's going to be buried within that smart object, if it makes sense. So when I make those changes in Photoshop, it's not going to update the original file here. What it's going to do is it's going to bring that copy here inside of Photoshop, and then you go through, I don't know if that question was asked before or after, we went through that workflow, where you open the original and then you can go in and make those changes. So whatever you save on that file will automatically be back here inside of Lightroom. So if, so when you if you make the adjustments here inside of the raw here inside of Lightroom, you can go in and you can make those adjustments. You can change those inside of Camera Raw. Now, when you make those adjustments in Camera Raw, it affects the copy of the photo. I don't believe it goes back and changes the original. If I'm wrong, someone say so in the comments, but I believe that's how it works. Can we save snapshots in camera? Yes, absolutely. You can save snapshots in there, just like you would here. Now, once again, you want to be doing this from Bridge. So let me open this. Is this a RAW file? Yes, it is. It's a horrible photo, but whoops, I should not say that. Sorry, Charles. I did not mean to say that. I thought it was one of my photos, but I did show you guys how to fix it. Oh man, I feel so bad. I should not have said that, but we did fix this, and it is fixable. So we did fix this in a previous live from lockdown under fix my photo. Oh my god, I'm horrible. So yeah, the snapshots are here. So there's the snapshots folder. I guess that's why I say, you know, if I fix my photo, give me your bad photos, not your good photos. All right. So moving on. Is there something on blending the edges? Ron is asking that. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that question there, Ron. I need some help moving my older Photoshop libraries to the new Lightroom version. Yeah, so you can export as a library. So here's another thing. If you're trying to move your libraries between Lightroom, what you want to do is where it says you want to be in your library module. Let me just move you to the other side here. So I'm out of the way. And then where it says import and export, hold down the Alt or the Option key, and now you can choose to export the catalog. And then you can export that as a catalog. And then when you go into the other Lightroom, you want to bring it in where it says import. Hold down Alt or Option, and you choose import catalog, and then choose that. And I believe the previous live from lockdown, we covered that. And that was either the last live from lockdown or the one before. So you guys can check that out. Check out, and you'll see the answers to those. So that's how we do that. All right, let's have a look at some questions. Let's bring you guys over here. And here we go. Thanks, Dirk. How do you smooth the edges on a collage in Photoshop? One of the good ways of doing that is to use gradients. And then when you use those gradients, you can blend them in. And I've got lots of tutorials on those. So check out any tutorial that I've done. In fact, the easy way to do this is if you go to let's go to my channel here. Let me just open up. I'll show you guys how to find that. Let me just go to YouTube. And if you go to the photoshopCAFE channel on YouTube, which is here, photoshopCAFE. I got an itchy nose there. Let me get to it. There we go. So go to the photoshopCAFE on YouTube. So here's photoshopCAFE. Click on YouTube. That's a quick way to get there. Here we are. And if you just go down to our most popular tutorial, popular uploads, right there. How to combine photos in Photoshop with layer mask. That tutorial shows you exactly how to blend those together. So that's how to do that. Thanks, Sandra. Peter, editing my bridge. Okay, so yes, if you make the changes inside of Bridge, will those be updated in Lightroom? Yes. When you make those changes in Bridge, you can actually be updating the metadata or that sidecar file. And then when you go into Lightroom, you have the option to import metadata. So if I did a photograph, and you know, this is where my Lightroom course is going to come in handy, because these are very down the rabbit hole kind of questions, but I've covered all of this. And it only takes me about 14 or 15 hours to cover all of this. But if we go into library, you have the ability under metadata, and you can copy the metadata, you can import or read the metadata from file. So if you made a difference or a change inside a Bridge, you can read the metadata from file here, and that will take that change that you made in Bridge and it will update it here inside of Lightroom. All right, what else we got? Do you have to change the date in Lightroom every year? No. And that was Sandy asking that question. Bruce, as a graphic designer, I often have to use JPEGs from stock houses, but I love the new raw tiles. Is there any way to use them with JPEGs? Yes! Thank you for asking that question. When we're starting Bridge or Photoshop, I'll show you both right now. But here's a photograph right now. I'm selecting this photo. And let me just go back to the essentials. So there's a photo, and if I want to look at the file information, I can do that just by choosing File Info. And there's a basic, and we can see that this is a JPEG. Easier ways of finding out it's a JPEG than that, but that's one way. So that's a JPEG file. And so if you right-click and you choose Open in Camera Raw, we can open JPEGs, TIFFs, and PNGs or PNGs inside of Camera Raw right here. Make our adjustments and then open it. If we open it as an object, all the adjustments that we made, we can double-click, and this will take us back into Camera Raw, even though we're working on a JPEG file. That smart object will take us back to Camera Raw, TIFFs, JPEGs, all of those. So that gives you the ability to go through and make those adjustments. Now, I did mention that when you make the adjustment on these files, you can't necessarily get that raw file or those raw settings back into Lightroom. In a way, you can, because if we were in here, let me just go a little bit more down the rabbit hole. When we right-click and then we go to our Develop settings, if I have any settings that I've made, presets and different things like that we've used, I can apply them right here. See how I clicked on that and that changed that? And then I could go to Lightroom if this was managed in Lightroom, and in Lightroom I update the metadata like I showed you guys a minute ago. All right, so let's see what other questions we've got here. Sorry, gotta go. See you, Susan. So, are you going to continue Live from Lockdown in 21? Yes, right now we have no plans of ending Live from Lockdown, or LFL, John. So, yep, we have all intentions to keep going for now. So, yeah. All right. So, anyway, guys, we've covered a lot of information. Let me know, maybe what you'd like to see covered next week, for next week's LFL. And because we're going to be back at 1 p.m. Hey, Russ is saying, thanks, Colin. Great to have up and running. See you next week. Thanks so much for your hard work. You're welcome, and thanks for coming every week, Russ. Good to see you again. And then Brian's asking, what percentage of images do you take into Photoshop? That's an interesting question. For me, most of them, but not always. I'm not sure what percentage. It depends. Okay, so if I'm doing client work, a small percentage, like concert photos and stuff like that, unless I need to remove objects and stuff like that, and we're just flying through those and we're going to share them on social media or whatever, a lot of the time I won't take those into Photoshop. But for my fine artwork, like I'm going to create something that I want to, share, like maybe one of my aerial photos or something like that, or a landscape photo, all of those go through Photoshop. Okay, Klaus, good to see you again. Paul, Happy New Year. Thanks, Paul. Sandy, Happy New Year to you too. And Beverly and Rod Shelley, good to see you as well. And Tracy, good to see you guys. It's good to have the crew back together. Chris Bacon, good to see you again. We're staying with Thursdays for now. Yes, we are. And if I do change the day or whatever, I'll let you guys know. But until further notice, we're back 1 p.m. every Thursday. And then Keith is saying, earlier you mentioned you save your images on a RAID. How do you store your photos locally on your drives or in the cloud? Why not? I save them on a RAID because I have terabytes worth of photographs. So I have a 32 terabyte RAID. And I just have a lot of photos and a lot of space. So it's too much space for me to try and fit just on an external hard drive. Also, RAID gives me redundancy. So it backs it up in case something happens. I'm not going to lose my photos, and also speed. But also I'm doing video. I'm doing video work. So I have video files. So I'm shooting a lot of video, not just photos. And the videos take up a lot of space. For the average shooter, you might be all right using, 0.5 portable drives. Let me see, some of these drives, there's different types. Lots of different types. So, you can get hard drives like this, a few gigabytes worth of size. Let me just put you guys in full screen. These come in, 4 or 5 terabyte. You can get them from Costco for less than $200. These drives are nice. The Samsungs, these are pretty, bit more expensive, but they're SSD drives. These ones are very expensive. These are also the Samsung ones, but these are just crazy fast. Thunderbolt 3. So, you're working on Mac. Those work really well. And also the ones I'm really liking right now. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get one and show you guys. Hang on. Yeah, it's downstairs. But the Extreme drives, so SanDisk Extreme drives. So have a look once again at that video that I created. It's on photoshopCAFE, it's on YouTube, and that was the one on my gear that I recommended of the year. And right now they have these drives. They're SanDisk Extreme drives. They're really fast SSD drives, and they're inexpensive. So these are, cheap. They're like $100 for 1 terabyte, and they're so fast. It's amazing. Okay, thanks, Colin. How about using a scanner with Photoshop? Yep, I use scanners. One of my clients, I use a CCD scanner. It's a big flatbed scanner that does up to 1200 DPI resolution. But that's a big $5,000, $10,000 scanner. Here at my place, I have a little Epson V500, I believe, or a V600, or let me tell you which one I have. It's a V something. V500. So I believe the new one is the V600. So yep, those work good. So fix your spelling of Lightroom in the title. Oh, room. You guys don't like the German Lightroom? Thanks for that. I will fix that. So we're not doing Lightroom today. So anyway, guys. So how you doing? How's Happy New Year, everybody. I appreciate you guys coming by. See you, Bruce. And I know a lot of you guys are going to jet now. So hey, it's great. Another new year, and I guess we'll see you guys next week. So see you at the cafe.